What if I told you that being intelligent might actually trap you? Imagine for a moment that the very thing you've been taught to value, intelligence, wasn't the ultimate blessing, but a hidden curse. What if all those times you've prided yourself on your knowledge, your intellect, and your ability to understand complex ideas were actually leading you down a path of suffering? You see, the world glorifies intelligence. From a young age, we are taught that being smart means success, that knowledge equals power, and that understanding everything will somehow bring us happiness. But what if this is a lie? Schopenhauer, the great philosopher, saw intelligence in a very different light. He believed that the more intelligent a person becomes, the more they suffer. Sounds paradoxical, right? We've been told our whole lives that being smart will lead to success, to happiness, to a better life. Yet Schopenhauer argues that the exact opposite is true. The more you understand, the more you realize how flawed, imperfect, and chaotic the world truly is. Think about it. When you're intelligent, your mind doesn't just accept things as they are. No, it questions everything. Every interaction, every situation, every choice you make, your mind is constantly analyzing, processing, and dissecting. And with each new piece of knowledge comes more responsibility, more stress, and more anxiety. The world around you begins to seem like an endless maze, and no matter how much you understand, there's always more to know, more to fix, more to change. But here's the kicker. The more you know, the more isolated you become. It's a strange paradox, but it's true. When you see the world in ways that others don't, it's hard to connect with them. You become more aware of the flaws in everything, and that awareness breeds a sense of loneliness. The very thing that makes you exceptional, the thing that sets you apart, also separates you from the people around you. So, ask yourself this: do you really want to be intelligent? Or is there another path to freedom and peace that you've never considered? Have you ever felt like the more you know, the less you actually understand? It's a curious thing. Most people believe that knowledge is power, and intelligence is the key to a better life. But Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent you are, the more you are burdened by the truth of the world. Intelligence, rather than setting you free, chains you to a never-ending cycle of doubt, overanalysis, and existential anxiety. Let's explore this idea. You've probably heard people say that knowledge is freedom, right? That if you just know more, you can solve your problems, avoid failure, and be truly happy. The smarter you are, the more opportunities you have, and the more in control of your life you feel. But does it really work that way? Schopenhauer challenges this belief by asking a simple yet profound question: what does intelligence truly give? U.S. The more you understand, the more aware you become of the flaws in the world, the imperfections in society, the hypocrisy in politics, the corruption in institutions. Instead of feeling liberated by your understanding, you start to feel trapped by it. You begin to see the world through a lens of cynicism, realizing that no matter how much you know, there will always be things you can't change, flaws you can't fix. Take, for example, relationships. The more intelligent you are, the more you might dissect the behavior of the people around you. You may find yourself questioning their motives, analyzing their words, and doubting their sincerity. While this analytical approach might help you navigate some aspects of life, it also makes connecting with others more difficult. Instead of enjoying spontaneous moments, you're constantly running them through your mental filter, evaluating their significance. It's exhausting. In fact, the more intelligent you are, the more you tend to overthink. Every decision, every conversation, every action is subject to endless scrutiny. A simple interaction can turn into a mental minefield. As you analyze what was said, how it was said, and what it might mean for your future. This type of mental processing consumes your energy, leaving you drained and disconnected from the present moment. Schopenhauer observed that ignorance is bliss, not because ignorance makes life better, but because people who aren't burdened by intellectual awareness can live in a simpler, more peaceful way. They don't feel the constant pressure of understanding everything, and they can experience life more fully. They are present in their interactions, enjoying the moment without questioning every detail. They can find contentment in the world's chaos, while the intelligent person remains caught in an endless loop of disillusionment. Think about how your intelligence might shape your experiences. When you're aware of the imperfections in life, you can't unsee them. That knowledge becomes a weight, a constant reminder that nothing is perfect, that everything could be better, and that the world's problems are often insurmountable. And while it's important to acknowledge these truths, constantly dwelling on them can make you feel helpless and frustrated. But here's where Schopenhauer's insight becomes truly powerful. He didn't believe that intelligence itself was the problem. The problem arises when we become attached to our intelligence, when we identify with it as a core part of our identity. We start to think that our intellect defines us, that our ability to understand and analyze makes us better, more valuable people. This is when intelligence becomes a trap. What Schopenhauer was really pointing to was a misidentification with the mind. He suggested that intelligence, instead of being a path to happiness, often traps us in a prison of our own making. The more we cling to our intellectual achievements, the more we suffer from our own expectations and disappointments. We start to believe that if we're not constantly evolving, analyzing, and growing, we're somehow failing. This is where many intelligent people begin to feel stuck. They're so caught up in their minds that they miss out on the simple joys of life. They fail to enjoy the present moment, always chasing the next thing to understand, the next problem to solve. And while they may accumulate knowledge, they rarely experience the kind of peace that comes from simply being. Schopenhauer didn't suggest that intelligence was a bad thing, but rather that it's a double-edged sword. When we learn to separate ourselves from our intellect, when we stop identifying with our thoughts and knowledge, we free ourselves from the prison we've built in our minds. In other words, the path to true freedom isn't about acquiring more knowledge. It's about releasing the need to constantly analyze, question, and dissect everything. So, if intelligence isn't the ultimate solution to life's struggles, what is? Schopenhauer believed that the answer lies in acceptance. It's in realizing that the world will never be perfect, and that happiness comes not from understanding everything, but from embracing life as it is. The true path to peace is not in knowing more, but in letting go of the need to know it all. Now, let's dive deeper into the most striking aspect of Schopenhauer's perspective on intelligence: the burden of awareness. The more intelligent you are, the more you are exposed to the flaws and complexities of the world. And with this awareness comes suffering. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence doesn't just bring wisdom, it also brings disillusionment. He observed that intelligent people are acutely aware of how imperfect everything is, and that awareness makes them see life through a lens of cynicism. They begin to notice the cracks in everything, from human nature to the systems of society. And this awareness can be a heavy weight to carry. Imagine for a moment that you have an extremely sharp mind. You can analyze situations in ways that others can't. You notice details that others overlook. While that might sound like an advantage, it's often a curse in disguise. Every problem, every injustice, every contradiction becomes painfully apparent to you. The more you know, the more you feel the pressure to change things, to make them better. But what if you can't? What if no matter how much you try, the world refuses to align with your understanding? This constant exposure to the imperfections of the world can lead to a deep sense of frustration. Schopenhauer argued that the more intelligent you are, the more isolated you become. Your ability to analyze everything around you often creates a distance between you and the people who don't see the world in the same way. You start to feel disconnected from the majority of people who may live more simply, less burdened by analysis. They can experience life without the constant pressure of overthinking every detail. You might have experienced this yourself. When you're highly intelligent, you often find yourself stuck in your own head, overanalyzing situations, conversations, and decisions. At times it can feel as if your thoughts are on autopilot, constantly racing from one idea to the next. In contrast, people who aren't caught up in this mental whirlwind often seem much more present in the moment. They enjoy life for what it is, without the need to dissect every experience. And this difference in perspective can create a disconnect you can't help but feel alone. Schopenhauer believed that the intelligent mind is always questioning, always probing, always searching for meaning. But sometimes, meaning isn't something that can be found through thought. It's something that's experienced through feeling, being, and acceptance. The problem with intelligence, according to Schopenhauer, is that it focuses so much on analysis and interpretation that it misses the point. Intelligence can't grasp the full richness of life because it's too busy breaking everything down into smaller, more manageable pieces. Let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever found yourself overthinking a situation, analyzing it from every angle, and in the process, losing the moment? You're so busy trying to figure out the right answer, the right approach, that you forget to actually experience the situation. Schopenhauer saw this as a tragic flaw in human nature. The more we try to control life with our intellect, the more we miss out on the simple joys of living. But it doesn't stop there. Schopenhauer took this idea even further by suggesting that the intelligent mind can become its own worst enemy. With heightened awareness comes an intense realization that the world is filled with suffering. When you're aware of all the pain, injustice, and chaos in the world, it can become overwhelming. The intelligent mind doesn't have the luxury of ignorance. It sees everything for what it is, and that can be an extremely painful realization. This burden of awareness can lead to a sense of hopelessness. The more you know, the more you realize just how little control you have over the world around you. And instead of feeling empowered by your intelligence, you begin to feel helpless. The more you understand about human nature, the more you see the dark sides of it: greed, selfishness, cruelty. The more you learn about the world, the more you realize that true change is difficult, and that many of the world's problems are insurmountable. This, Schopenhauer believed, is where true suffering lies. Intelligence makes you acutely aware of your own limitations and the limitations of the world. It strips away the illusion of control and leaves you face to face with the chaos of existence. And that can be terrifying. The more intelligent you are, the more disconnected you feel from those who can still find peace in ignorance. So what do we do with this awareness? The simple truth is that it's not enough to just know. Knowing the truth about the world isn't enough to bring peace. Schopenhauer argued that, to truly find peace, you must accept the world as it is. You must stop fighting against the flaws and imperfections, and instead embrace them. Intelligence may give you insight, but it is acceptance that will give you peace. The true wisdom, Schopenhauer suggests, comes not from knowing more, but from letting go of the need to know it all. So now that we've discussed the burden of awareness, let's dive deeper into Schopenhauer's most controversial assertion. Intelligence does not lead to happiness. In fact, Schopenhauer believed that intelligence, while often celebrated as the key to success, can actually hinder true contentment. Imagine this. You've spent your entire life working to be more knowledgeable, more intellectually capable. You're the person everyone turns to for answers, the one who seems to have a solution for everything. But despite all your achievements, you find yourself unfulfilled, anxious, and constantly questioning your place in the world. What's missing? Schopenhauer's answer might surprise you. Happiness does not come from intellectual achievement or knowledge. It comes from something much simpler: acceptance of the present moment, without overrizing it. While intelligence may make you aware of life's intricacies, It can also disconnect you from the simplicity of living. Intelligent people often spend their lives living in their heads. They're always thinking, evaluating, and analyzing every experience. When you're constantly questioning your decisions, every interaction feels like a puzzle to solve. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to prove your intellect. Even leisure time becomes an intellectual exercise as you try to understand the deeper meaning of everything around you. This is what Schopenhauer referred to as the trap of the intellect, the idea that overthinking prevents you from truly experiencing life. Now, think about people who aren't caught in this mental whirlwind. They don't dwell on every word they say, every action they take. They simply live. They enjoy the moment, even if it's imperfect. They don't waste time analyzing their happiness, they just feel it. This is where real happiness lies, in the ability to enjoy life without the constant pressure of understanding it all. Schopenhauer's view is grounded in a simple yet profound truth. Happiness comes from being, not from knowing. The more intelligent you are, the more you tend to overthink, and the more you try to control every aspect of your life. But real happiness isn't about control. It's about acceptance, accepting the world for what it is, accepting yourself for who you are, and embracing the present moment without needing to understand everything. Let's take an example. Imagine you're having a simple dinner with friends. If you're not overly concerned with analyzing the conversation, you can enjoy the company, the food, and the moment. But if you're constantly evaluating every part of the evening, what was said, how it was said, how you came across, you lose the ability to fully enjoy the experience. You become trapped in your head, rather than being present in your life. This is the dilemma faced by highly intelligent people. The more you understand, the more you tend to overanalyze. Schopenhauer believed that this constant analysis blocks the flow of joy. Instead of simply living, you become caught in a cycle of perfectionism and fear of failure. You start to believe that in order to be happy, you must understand everything, make the right decisions, and avoid mistakes. But this creates a never-ending loop of anxiety and dissatisfaction. Because perfection is impossible, the intelligent mind often suffers from what we might call paralysis by analysis, the constant desire to control, to perfect, to overthink. And in the process, it overlooks the simplicity of happiness. Happiness does not come from the mind. It comes from the ability to accept life as it is, without trying to figure it out. Schopenhauer believed that in order to find peace, we must let go of the need to understand everything. We must stop trying to control life and instead accept its unpredictability. While intelligence may give us insight into the workings of the world, it does not give us the ability to be content with what we have. This is where wisdom comes into play, the wisdom to know that not everything needs to be figured out, the wisdom to understand that life is not a problem to be solved, but a journey to be lived. This is where many intelligent people get stuck. They are so focused on figuring things out that they forget to live. They get trapped in the cycle of overthinking and self-doubt, always believing that if they just understood more, everything would fall into place. But in reality, the more you try to understand, the more elusive happiness becomes. The paradox is simple. Happiness comes when you stop trying to control it. So, what can we learn from this? Schopenhauer teaches us that happiness is not the result of intellect. It's the result of learning to letting go of the need to understand everything, letting go of the need for perfection, and letting go of the idea that knowledge is the key to happiness. The true key to happiness is acceptance, accepting life, accepting the moment, and accepting yourself without judgment. Now, this doesn't mean that intelligence is useless or that we should stop thinking. It simply means that intelligence, when overemphasized, can blind us to the simpler, more profound experiences of life. Real happiness comes not from knowing everything, but from being present and embracing the world as it is. Schopenhauer was very clear about one thing: genius comes at a cost. The more brilliant you are, the more you suffer, not because of your genius itself, but because of the isolation and loneliness that often accompanies it. The intelligent mind sees things that others can't, understands the complexity of the world, and recognizes its many flaws. But while this awareness can give you deep insight into human nature and society, it can also lead to profound emotional exhaustion. Consider, for a moment, the life of the great genius. Whether it's a brilliant artist, philosopher, or scientist, geniuses often spend their lives in solitude, consumed by their ideas. They are separated from the world around them by the very nature of their extraordinary intellect. This isn't by choice. It's a natural consequence of having a mind that is constantly at work, analyzing, thinking, and understanding things at a level most people cannot even begin to grasp. Schopenhauer argued that genius and loneliness are deeply intertwined. The more you understand, the more you realize how few people share your perspective. You become disconnected from the ordinary experiences of life because you see everything through a more complex lens. You see the flaws in people, in systems, and in the world itself, and this can make it nearly impossible to relate to those who don't see the world in the same way. This kind of intellectual alienation can lead to a deep sense of loneliness. The genius doesn't find solace in the crowds because they can no longer relate to them. The typical conversations, the small talk, the simple joys that others find in life, these all seem superficial to the person whose mind is constantly at work. Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person is, the more they experience this emotional distance from others. The result is often existential loneliness. The genius begins to question whether anyone can truly understand them, whether anyone can truly relate to the depth of their thoughts and experiences. This can lead to frustration, as the genius longs for connection but finds it elusive. The very gift of intelligence becomes a barrier between the individual and the rest of the world. Take, for example, some of the most brilliant minds in history: Vincent van Gogh, Albert Einstein, or Friedrich Nietzsche. Despite their immense contributions to humanity, their personal lives were marked by profound isolation. Van Gogh's work was not recognized in his lifetime, and he struggled with mental illness and loneliness. Einstein, despite being one of the most brilliant minds in history, found it difficult to relate to others outside of his scientific community. Nietzsche, a genius whose philosophical insights shaped modern thought, suffered from extreme alienation and mental breakdowns. These examples illustrate a painful truth: the cost of genius is often emotional isolation. Schopenhauer understood this struggle well. He believed that the burden of genius is not just intellectual, but also emotional. It is the realization that, no matter how much you understand, you will never fully connect with the world around you in the same way that others can. This sense of isolation is not just about being alone physically. It's about being unable to communicate the depth of your thoughts, to share the complexity of your understanding with others. And this can be a source of immense suffering. But the price of genius isn't just emotional isolation, it's also mental exhaustion. The constant mental activity, the constant striving to understand, to analyze, to dissect, it wears down the mind. Schopenhauer noted that geniuses often experience a wearing out of their mental faculties because their minds are in a constant state of overdrive. The more they understand, the more they see the limits of their knowledge, and the more they become aware of how much more there is to learn. It's a never-ending cycle of mental exhaustion, and yet there's a twist to this tale. Schopenhauer didn't believe that genius should be abandoned or ignored. He didn't argue that intelligence was inherently negative. Rather, he suggested that we need to reframe our relationship with intelligence. The key to avoiding the isolation and exhaustion of genius isn't about rejecting your intellect, but rather about disengaging from the belief that your intellect is your identity. It's about recognizing that you are not your mind, and your worth is not determined by how much you know. The intellectual's greatest challenge is not the lack of connection with others, but the attachment to their mind. The moment you stop identifying yourself solely with your intellect and instead embrace your true self, you begin to free yourself from the mental prison that genius often creates. This shift in perspective can lead to emotional freedom. By disidentifying with your thoughts and your intelligence, you begin to see yourself as more than just your mind. You realize that intelligence is just a tool, a powerful tool, but not the entirety of who you are. Once you accept this, the burden of genius begins to lift, and the emotional alienation that comes with heightened awareness begins to fade. Schopenhauer believed that true peace comes not from accumulating knowledge, but from releasing the need to understand everything. The genius who learns to let go of their need to control life with intellect can finally experience the peace and connection they've been seeking all along. This part emphasizes the emotional and psychological cost of genius. Continuing Schopenhauer's exploration of how intelligence can isolate and exhaust us, and how true peace can only come from releasing our attachment to intellect. It builds toward the realization that letting go of intellectual control can bring emotional freedom. So, now that we've seen the price of genius, the isolation, the loneliness, and the emotional exhaustion that often come with heightened awareness, Schopenhauer offers us a profound solution. Escape the mental prison of the intellect and embrace a life of acceptance and awareness. But what does that really mean? How do we escape from the endless cycle of overthinking, analyzing, and questioning that traps so many intelligent people in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction? Schopenhauer's answer lies not in seeking more knowledge, but in learning to let go of the need to understand everything. At its core, Schopenhauer's philosophy is about releasing control over the mind and embracing life as it is. Intelligence, as we've seen, can be a burden because it makes us hyper-aware of the imperfections in the world. The intelligent mind constantly analyzes, judges, and tries to improve things. But this desire to change the world leads to frustration and unhappiness. The more you try to fix things, the more you realize how unfixable they are. And this is where true peace comes in. Instead of trying to fix the world, Schopenhauer suggests that we need to accept it for what it is. Acceptance isn't about passivity or resignation. It's about recognizing that not everything can be controlled or understood. It's about finding peace in the present moment, without the constant need to analyze and dissect every experience. This approach is counterintuitive to the way most intelligent people think. We've been taught our whole lives that knowledge is power, and that the more we understand, the more control we have over our lives. But Schopenhauer argues that this is a trap. The more we try to control life with our intellect, the more we push ourselves away from true happiness. Think of it like this. When you're caught up in overthinking and constantly analyzing every situation, you become disconnected from the present moment. You're not really experiencing life. You're observing it from a distance, through the lens of your intellect. You might understand the world in a deeper way, but that understanding doesn't necessarily make you happier or more fulfilled. In fact, it often does the opposite. Schopenhauer believed that true freedom comes from letting go of the need to analyze and control everything. It's about stepping outside of the mind and observing it, instead of identifying with it. When you can take a step back and simply observe your thoughts, you begin to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of those thoughts. This is a powerful shift in perspective. By detaching from your thoughts, you free yourself from the mental prison that intelligence can create. You stop identifying with your intellect and instead, you identify with the deeper part of yourself, what Schopenhauer might call the true self, or what modern spiritual teachers often refer to as awareness or consciousness. The idea here is simple. You are not your thoughts. You are not the intellect that constantly analyzes and evaluates everything. You are the awareness that observes those thoughts. When you learn to separate yourself from your thoughts, you create space between your true self and the mental patterns that drive you. This is where the peace Schopenhauer speaks of can be found. It's not in gaining more knowledge or understanding the world in a more profound way. It's in releasing the need to understand it all and learning to embrace life as it is. This is the essence of acceptance. Accepting the world for what it is, without trying to change it, analyze it, or improve it. In practical terms, this means shifting your mindset from one of control to one of acceptance. Instead of fighting against the world, you learn to flow with it. Instead of trying to change the things you cannot control, you focus on accepting the things you cannot change. You begin to live with the understanding that not everything needs to be figured out. But Schopenhauer doesn't just stop at acceptance. He also emphasizes the importance of awareness, the ability to observe your thoughts without becoming attached to them. This practice of awareness allows you to step outside of your mind and see it for what it is, a tool, not your identity. One of the most powerful practices that Schopenhauer and other philosophers have recommended is meditation. Meditation isn't about silencing the mind. It's about watching the mind without becoming attached to it. It's about stepping back and observing your thoughts, rather than identifying with them. By practicing this kind of mindful awareness, you can begin to disconnect from the constant chatter of the intellect and experience the stillness and peace that lie beneath it. Schopenhauer's solution is simple yet profound. Let go of your attachment to intellect and embrace the peace that comes with accepting life as it is. This doesn't mean abandoning your intelligence. It means recognizing that your worth is not tied to your intellect. Your true worth comes from your ability to be present and to experience life without constantly analyzing it. When you stop fighting against the world with your intellect, you start to find freedom. You begin to see that peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from letting life flow as it is, without needing to understand it all. This is where true happiness lies, in the freedom of acceptance and the power of awareness. As we come to the final part of this journey, let's reflect on the profound realization that Schopenhauer offers us. You are not your thoughts. The voice inside your head, the voice that constantly analyzes, judges, and criticizes, does not define you. It's a product of your conditioning, your past, your experiences. But it is not who you truly are. The truth is, your true self is beyond thought, beyond intellect, beyond all the mental noise. When you begin to realize this, something incredible happens. You stop identifying with the constant chatter of your mind, and you begin to step into a deeper awareness, the awareness of simply being. You begin to see that the voice in your head, while powerful, is just another thought passing through your consciousness, not a permanent part of who you are. Schopenhauer's philosophy teaches us that freedom comes when we stop identifying with our thoughts and start identifying with the observer, the part of us that simply watches without judgment, without attachment. This shift in perspective is the key to unlocking the deepest level of peace and happiness that we are all capable of experiencing. But this is not an easy process. For years, we've been conditioned to believe that our thoughts define us, that our intellect is the most important part of who we are. Society rewards intellectual achievement, and we are constantly encouraged to strive for more knowledge, more understanding. But this constant striving, this never-ending chase for more, keeps us trapped in a cycle of discontent. So, the question is, how do we break free? The answer is simple, but it's not always easy. It starts with awareness, the awareness that you are not your thoughts. This is the first step. You can begin this journey today by practicing mindfulness, by observing your thoughts without judgment. When you catch yourself thinking, "I am not good enough," or "I will fail," simply pause and ask yourself, who is thinking this thought? The answer is clear. It's not you. You are the one observing the thought, not the thought itself. This simple realization that you are not your thoughts is the gateway to true freedom. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, you free yourself from the constant need to prove your worth or validate your existence. You no longer need to chase after intellectual achievements to feel valuable, because you realize that your value is inherent in simply being. Schopenhauer encourages us to step outside of the mind and begin to experience life as it is, without the lens of constant analysis. This doesn't mean abandoning your intellect or disregarding the knowledge you've gained throughout your life. It means recognizing that your intellect is just one tool, not the core of your being. When you let go of the need to control everything through intellect, you open yourself up to a deeper, more meaningful connection with life. But how do you live this out in practice? The answer is presence. When you are truly present, you are free from the constant pull of your thoughts. You stop worrying about the future or regretting the past. You experience life as it unfolds, without the interference of overthinking. This is the key to true happiness, not in knowing more, but in being more. Here's a challenge for you. Over the next 24 hours, practice simply observing your thoughts without reacting to them. Notice when your mind tells you something negative, like, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never succeed," and instead of believing it, just observe it. Say to yourself, "My mind is having the thought that I am not good enough." When you start to disidentify with your thoughts, you'll notice that their power over you begins to fade. This is not an overnight transformation. It requires consistent practice, but the more you practice, the more you begin to break free from the prison of your own mind. The more you let go of the need to control and understand everything, the more you begin to experience the freedom that comes from simply being. Schopenhauer's final message is this: true peace comes not from knowing more, but from letting go of the need to know it all. The more you release the attachment to your thoughts, the more you begin to experience the stillness and peace that lie beneath the surface of the mind. When you stop believing in the voice that tells you who you are and what you can do, you step into something greater. You step into your true self, a self that is beyond the limits of intellect, beyond the limitations of the past, and beyond the worries of the future. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind those thoughts. And when you realize this, you become limitless. So, ask yourself today, will you continue to listen to the voice that holds you back, the voice that says you're not enough, or will you step beyond it into the freedom of your true self? The answer lies in your awareness, and the choice is yours.